We'll call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Standing Order 81.5, the committee will deal with supplementary estimates B 2017-2018 and vote 1B under the Canada Revenue Agency. Appearing today, we have the Minister of National Revenue, the Honourable Diane Leboutier. And as well, witnesses from the Canada Revenue Agency, Mr. Hamilton, who's Commissioner, Ms. Jeanette Caron, Acting Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Ted Gallivan, Assistant Commissioner, International Large Business and Investigations Branch, and Mr. Frank Vermeten, and I might have that name wrong, Frank, Assistant Commissioner, Assessments, Benefits and Services Branch. So welcome all. I know both the Minister and the Commissioner have remarks. Before we get to that, just before we get, if you could hold for a moment, we have a request for a supplementary project budget for our pre-budget consultations. This is normal on the pre-budget consultations process. It'll end up being about the same amount of money as we spent in previous years, and so the request is before you. It's for an additional $29,900. Do we have a mover for that? Moved by Mr. Fergus. All those in favour? Opposed? And as it says on the sheet, states on the sheet, that is for the witnesses that have come forward. And just one other thing before I get to your point of order, Tom, if I could. There is in the room, and I want to recognize them with Mr. Remy Trudel, who's a professor, former member of Parliament in Quebec. There's 43 students from École Nationale d'Administration Publique who are here to see how things operate. Thank you all. There was a call for a point of order. The floor is yours, Mr. Commish.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I don't want to take up much time because we rarely get ministers before the committee. At the end of the meeting, one of the meetings leading up to this one, you had said that you were giving notice right now to officials that we have a problem with data. And so I'm just following up on that. You stated that right now as chair that you expected the Chief Commissioner of the CRA to be here, and I think we've met that. You also expected the Chief Commissioner to bring with him the data that will show what the applications are as best CRA can and what the exceptions and rejections are as compared to 2 or 3 years back. You also said that you expect the Chief Commissioner that the time frames on applications and turnarounds on those applications over the past 5-year period on the disability tax credit and as it relates to diabetes. So I'm just following up on that, Mr. Chair, just making sure that the witnesses know that you expected information. There was no debate, so I take that as a notice of the committee to the witnesses.
Yes, and the clerk had sent that information to CRA, and we'll see as we proceed what information the Commissioner and the Minister can provide us with. So thank you for that. That notice was given. We'll start then. Madam Minister, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the committee's study of the supplementary estimated B. Le commissaire Bob Hamilton m'accompagne.
I am joined by Commissioner Bob Hamilton, who will speak to you more about this and other questions following my remarks. I'd also like to introduce 3 senior officials from the Canada Revenue Agency: Jeanette Caron, Acting Assistant Commissioner, Finance and Administration Branch; Ted Gallivan, Assistant Commissioner, International Large Business and Investigations Branch; and Frank Vermeten, Assistant Commissioner, Assessment, Benefit and Service Branch. First of all, I would like to provide, as Minister for the past 2 years, I would like to provide members with an overview of some recent achievements following my second year of my mandate as Minister of National Revenue. First, the government is steadfast in its efforts to crack down on tax evasion and combat tax avoidance. We will increasingly identify aggressive tax planning schemes that are not in the spirit of the Income Tax Act. The government has invested nearly $1 billion in budgets 2016 and 2017 to address this complex multi-billion-dollar problem, which is depriving all Canadians of quality services. The agency's auditors now have access to more and better refined information, which helps them to focus on the individuals and corporations that actively seek to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. Second, we have strengthened our partnerships and cooperation with international governments. The results speak for themselves. The agency is currently conducting more than 990 audits related to offshore financial structures. It is investigating more than 42 corporations and individuals with offshore accounts. The agency has also imposed $44 million in penalties on promoters and tax preparers. Third, regarding our work to improve support for Indigenous peoples and people living in remote communities, the agency is actively contributing to help the government attain its promises. It is increasing its outreach efforts to make these individuals aware of the benefits available to them and reducing the challenges associated with filing their tax returns. This past October, in Yellowknife, I announced the agency's Northern Consultations Action Plan. This plan outlines actions over the next 2 years to improve the agency's services for Northern residents. Mr. Chair, my main objective is to improve the client experience for Canadians who access tax services. Canadians communicate with us in good faith. They are important clients, not just taxpayers. They deserve to receive quality services in a timely manner. In order to improve the customer experience, here are some of the latest service improvements from our agency. The agency has introduced enhanced electronic processes for filing tax returns, such as information autofill. This secure service allows Canadians to automatically fill in parts of income tax and benefit returns with information that the CRA has available at the time of filing the return. This helps reduce the amount of time Canadians need to complete their tax forms by some 86%. Last year, more than 86% of Canadians have filed their taxes electronically, almost 750,000 more than the previous year. During 2017, the agency has taken steps to improve and modernize its call center services. We have hired more agents. We have increased self-service options, leaving more time for agents to provide the answers to more complex questions. It is also in the process of upgrading its call queue technology and enhancing training programs to ensure our clients receive the quality service that they do deserve. While I am proud of these accomplishments, I fully recognize that there is still work to be done. This week's Auditor General's report was clear, and I accepted all of his recommendations regarding our call centres. In our first budget, our government invested $50 million over 4 years to improve the range of services we provide to the public. Starting this year, our clients will begin seeing the results of these investments. Rest assured, we are listening to Canadians. We know we must explain the agency's actions as clearly as possible so that its intentions are not misinterpreted. We are seeking advice from Canadians to ensure that the government's programs and services are tailored to those who need them, to fit those who need them. We encourage Canadians to enter into a dialogue with the agency to share their concerns. In fact, I announced today that the reestablishing of a council for persons with disabilities. There will be 12 persons who will be on this committee, and their goal will be to formulate recommendations to give to the minister to make more equitable, transparent, and accessible all of this for persons with disabilities. Outreach and consultation are the key, and the agency will continue to work with Canadians to ensure their views are incorporated into the decisions it makes. Mr. Chair, I will now yield the floor to Commissioner Hamilton, who will speak to the Supplementary Estimates B and other matters of interest to the committee. Once again, I thank you for inviting me to speak with you today.
I should point out, perhaps before you start, that normally at committee we try and narrow the focus to the supplemental estimates themselves. At the meeting today, the minister has said she's most open to dealing with not just the estimates, but there's been the Auditor General's report, which she has mentioned in her remark, and other issues that members may have in their mind. So in terms of my chairing, we won't be just dealing with the narrow focus of the supplemental estimates. It'll be open to basically to whatever is on your mind. So, Commissioner Hamilton, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the invitation to present the agency's 2017-18 Supplementary Estimates B, and for the opportunity to address questions, as you say, which could come from a number of different sources, but as foreshadowed, would include the eligibility requirements for the disability tax credit. Through these supplementary estimates, the agency is seeking an increase of $44.9 million in its voted authorities for the following items. Premièrement, l'agence demande 43.
First, the agency is requesting $43.9 million to implement and administer various measures to continue its efforts to crack down on tax evasion and aggressive tax planning as announced in Budget 2017.
Team measures aimed at preventing tax evasion and improving tax compliance to increase the number of audits of high-risk businesses. Hiring additional auditors to review electronic funds transfers and to increase the number of large businesses and income audit teams to 8 this fiscal year and up to 16 next fiscal, targeting additional high-risk taxpayers, including multinationals, and the expansion of our business intelligence activities. The $43.9 million we are requesting represents the first of 5 years under the proposed 2017 budget funding to crack down on tax evasion and aggressive tax planning.
The second item for which the agency is seeking incremental funding is $1 million related to the government's advertising campaign on the new Canada Caregiver Credit.
To generate awareness of the new credit and to increase the number of eligible Canadians who claim it on their income tax returns. The campaign will also promote content on the Canada.ca website that provides information about taxes and benefits. Following the approval of these supplementary estimates, the agency's revised 2017-18 authorities will total $4.4 billion. In summary, these resources sought through these estimates will allow the agency to continue to deliver on its mission to administer tax, benefits, and related programs and to ensure compliance on behalf of governments across Canada. Monsieur le Président, je remercie le comité.
Mr. Chair, I do thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to provide information about the administration of the disability tax credit.
The DTC, or the Disability Tax Credit, or DTC, is a non-refundable tax credit that provides tax relief for people living with disabilities or the family members who support them. The CRA remains committed to ensuring that all Canadians receive all the credits and tax benefits to which they are entitled, including the disability tax credit. The CRA is also responsible for ensuring this non-refundable tax credit is administered fairly and in accordance with the Income Tax Act. Canadians expect the agency to do its due diligence to ensure that the individuals who receive benefits and credits, including the DTC, meet the requirements set out in the Act. Last year, some 770,000 Canadians claimed the credit. The corresponding tax relief provided by the DTC as a result was more than $1.3 billion in 2016-17. And I'm happy to provide information on year by year in writing after this meeting, but suffice to say that we've seen the value and number of the credits go up year over year. As the Minister mentioned in her opening remarks, the agency is reinstating the Disability Advisory Committee to ensure that the views of a broad range of stakeholders are considered in the agency's decision-making process. Their perspectives will inform the CRA about how to present information in the DTC application so that it is clear to all applicants. The CRA has a long history of consulting with Canadians and stakeholders on administering taxes and benefits in general, and the DTC in particular. We use the feedback from these consultations to improve the way we administer the program and to communicate any changes to Canadians through our outreach efforts. For example, the agency's web pages on the DTC feature easy-to-understand videos that outline various scenarios for individuals to determine if they qualify for the DTC. Through solid communications, both by listening and explaining, we continue to strive to improve the administration of our tax and benefit system in a manner that is fair and consistent with the relevant legislation. This is part of our broader objective to ensure that Canadians have trust and confidence in the administration of our programs and services. At this time, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that the committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we'll start a series of questions. I did raise questions with you in a note from the clerk, and we'll get to those in a bit. As we mostly do with ministers, we'll go to 5-minute rounds instead of the usual 7 for the first 4. So starting with Ms. Sadhu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm sharing my time with Michael. My question is to Minister Leviat. Minister, as a chair of All-Party Diabetes Caucus, and from the last few weeks, I heard concerns from Canadians and stakeholders regarding access to the disability tax credit for type 1 diabetics. I appreciate the time you and your parliamentary secretary took to meet with me and discuss the situation and allow me to share with the concerns what I have heard from stakeholders and from all the other people. Can you tell us what both you and your agency are doing to address these concerns?
Thank you for your question. I would also like to thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I know that you are a dedicated advocate for Canadians living with diabetes, as well as for your constituents in Brampton South. My English isn't so good, so please accept my apologies as I will continue in French.
First of all, I would like to shed some light on the fact that we met with Diabetes Canada, Diabetes Quebec to hear their concerns and understand their points of view. Further to these meetings, it became clear to me that we would have to have mechanisms in place to deal with this. This is why I announced today the return of the Disability Advisory Committee, which was in place in 2004, but was cut by the Conservatives when they came to government in 2006. The same Conservatives who present themselves as defenders of the most vulnerable. The committee will work in collaboration with the agency to ensure that all measures that affect disabilities, including of any nature, will meet the exigencies of the legislation. this committee will inform the agency of the specific expectations of persons with disabilities. It will help them understand the administrative practices and provide greater accessibility to credits and greater transparency. This will improve the quality of service that we provide for persons with disabilities. I certainly understand very well that living with a disability has consequences for the person, for the family, for that person's environment. This is why I want to be sure that the agency will administer these credits in a fair, transparent way. Over the years, we've seen an approval rate increase of some 20%, and we have tried to make the forms clearer. We have worked with super nurses who have developed forms for people who live in remote areas and who have certain difficulties. We have worked also with the agency to hire nurses in the agency to work to understand the needs of people with disabilities.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister. I was very happy to see that you included the Indigenous peoples in your opening comments, and you made reference to remote communities. I represent the Northwest Territories, as you know, and I was very happy to see you come and visit us, and I think we had some good discussions there. But I wanted to know if maybe you could expand more and tell us how the agency can ensure that the Aboriginal communities have equal access to the many benefits that is being administered by CRA.
Notre gouvernement est déterminé.
Our government is determined to renew its relationship with the Indigenous peoples, and particularly with respect to their understanding of the benefits that they are entitled to. I have discussed with persons who work in liaison with the agency. I, too, come from a remote area, and I know full well that a remote area, the further away it is from Ottawa, well, the harder it is to be seen and heard. And we have our communications available in a variety of Indigenous languages, and our agency has visited some 698 communities in remote areas and elsewhere to provide information. Much progress has been made, but work remains to be done. And we will work in cooperation with the Indigenous peoples and their partners in these regions.
You're out of time. You're a little over time. Michael, Mr. Kelly.
This committee has heard that processing times for the disability tax credit have gone from approximately 3 to 4 weeks to over 40 weeks before the first questionnaire is sent to an applicant's physician. What are the current processing times for a disability tax credit application, and what has caused the delay?
Madam Minister or Mr. Commissioner, whoever wants to go.
Madam Minister, please.
I can take that question. I would say, just to broaden for 1 second beyond disability credit claims, we are experiencing an increase in processing times in a number of places across the agency in assessments, reassessments, for a variety of reasons, one of which is a transition that we undertook in November of last year to realign our business with the way that things have evolved in terms of more electronic. So do you know what it is currently? Pardon me?
What is the current wait time for a disability tax credit?
And the current wait time for disability tax credit, we aim to process them within 8 weeks. The statistics that I have, but if the current time is we could be higher up to 10 weeks or so. But I haven't heard the 40-week number. I'm happy to go back and check.
Yeah,
but
we were
I
told
haven't heard
40
anything that long.
What are disability tax credit applications in fact frozen, as was the testimony we heard? Is there a hold on that particular tax credit application right now?
They are not frozen. As I indicated, though, we are experiencing some processing delays. So we are trying to get those processed as fast as we can. That goes broader than the credit, and we have invested more money to try to get us through this period as we transition, and we are expecting service level rates to return to normal in the coming weeks.
Okay. Madam Minister, your mandate letter from the Prime Minister charges you to ensure that the CRA is more client-focused and that you'll proactively contact Canadians about the tax credits to which they're entitled. On Tuesday, the Auditor General released a report finding that 2/3 of calls are not answered by your agency, and that for those that are answered, a full 30% of people that contact the call centres are given incorrect information. How are you able to proactively contact Canadians, and how are you able to proactively ensure that Canadians get the tax credits they're entitled to when they can't reach your agency and they're given incorrect information when they do get through?
As I mentioned, I became aware of the Auditor General's report, and I agree with all the recommendations therein. Since our first budget, we have invested some $50 million over 4 years to be able to hire persons who will help in the call centers. I can also tell you that, contrary to your government when it was in place under the former minister, Carolyn Findlay, there were cuts. At that time, there were cuts at the agency. Now we are investing in the agency. We have a new telephone platform which will be better able to meet the needs of those clients who call into the CRA. The old obsolete platform that was used in the past was 20 years old, and there were cuts made by the previous government in training, in the numbers of employees. It has become very important for Canadians to have the best information possible, best training for those working there, best support available, and also we want to meet the standards of the needs of Canadians and not the standards of the past.
This Tuesday that you became aware of the seriousness of the service problems at the CRA? When did you become aware that there were such serious problems at the CRA with service?
Well, that's not the case whatsoever. I'm very pleased to be able to tell you that over the last 2 years, I've been able to visit most of the CRA's offices. I've visited the call centres. I've met the employees working in the call centres. And I myself have sat in on some of their calls. And our action plan was laid out as of last year in order to respond to the needs that Canadians were expressing. And over my 2 years of work in the field, I have seen just how the cuts that were made during your government had really destroyed piece by piece the services available through the call centres, the self-serve. You should be ashamed of what took place then.
Calls were being answered, and the Auditor General found that it was only that 64% were being hung up on. So is that what your staff were telling you, that all the calls were getting through, or did they agree with the Auditor General that you were unable to answer phone calls?
I will allow the Commissioner to answer your question.
On to that. The first issue is we were aware before the Auditor General's report of some of the issues with the phone system. We were running on an old technology, and we already had in place plans to get a new technology which would be delivered next year, which will allow us to provide the same kind of service that you'd be more used to with more up-to-date technology. So that's point one. The other point which the Auditor General raised is how we report on our service. And what we had done in the past is we said, if you get through into our lines, we will answer your call within 2 minutes, 80% of the time. And so that means you get through. And the way we were able to deliver on that commitment was we couldn't let everybody through the line. So some people would get busy signals, they would have to call back. And that was the process of what we could do with the technology that we had. And so, yes, we agree that there's a number of people who get busy signals and have to call back. And what we're doing now is we're trying to invest a bit more money now until we get the new technology to improve that service, to ensure a good balance between how long you have to wait on the line and how quickly you can get through. So they weren't new issues that the Auditor General raised, and we have an action plan. So we agreed with his recommendations, and we have an action plan to deliver those. And that will, it's beginning right now, but it will really kick in next year when we get the new platform for the telephone calls.
Okay, we are 2 minutes over. Pat, Mr. Dussault.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister. This may be the only time I get to ask you questions about Mr. Bronfman's case. Given that the Liberals have not accepted my motion, which called for a full study of that situation, and I hope I will get further answers on that, and as well as answers from you, could you please say something about Mr. Bronfman's situation? What I can tell you today is that what counts for me is to allow the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, to carry out its work, and that all information about the Paradise Papers is certainly taken very seriously by the agency. Yes, I understand that, but could you tell me something about Mr. Bronfman's actual case? Well, I cannot. The law forbids me from speaking to any specific issue involving any specific taxpayer. We receive 30 million tax statements a year, personal income tax returns, and I am not able to speak to any of them. Thank you. That's a good answer. The law does not allow you to speak to this, but what would the consequences be if you were to do so? Well, I might even have to face imprisonment. Very well. Do you know that the Prime Minister has spoken of a specific taxpayer's situation? I am the Minister of Revenue. No one is above the law, and our agency will do the work that it is called upon to do, and I can assure you that that's exactly how we will be working as long as I am here in this position. We will not be discussing any individual case. Have you launched an investigation into the Prime Minister's statements then, given that he may have broken the law? Look, I'm the Minister of the CRA, and I work with my people and my employees. And what the government has done over the last 2 years is invest nearly $1 million to really address tax evasion and avoidance. But as Minister, aren't you in a position to ensure that the law is applied and that all personal income tax returns and cases are confidential? Well, they are confidential, and I can assure you that no parliamentarian whatsoever will be getting a hand on the CRA's tax files. You mean the Prime Minister? I mean all parliamentarians, including everyone. So we should expect some sort of consequence then for the Prime Minister, like imprisonment. Well, the Minister of Revenue speaking about a specific case, and I'm sure that you would not want your personal case dredged up here, or that anyone's income tax returns be discussed here, is completely out of the question. But that's what the Prime Minister did. He was asked questions about Mr. Bronfman, and he said that he was fully satisfied by his answers and of the tax structure that had been set up in the Cayman Islands, and he basically whitewashed him with the click of his fingers. So I'm certainly looking forward to an investigation that you will carry out on the Prime Minister to see if he has broken the law. Another topic, the Auditor General. One of your undertakings is to make services more accessible to Canadians, and that part of your mandate, you have really put it up there on the government's propaganda sites as a permanent undertaking that's an ongoing one for you, but honestly, it looks like it's not a success, given that all the results show that first, you don't answer the phone, and when you do, 30% of taxpayers calling in are given inaccurate information. So about these calls, do you tape the calls that Canadians make to the self-service lines? The self-serve telephone system we have now does not allow for recording. We need to set up this new platform that will be able to handle this. As for the technical details of what is upcoming the 3 interventions we will make in the future. Commissioner Hamilton will be able to tell you more about that. But my question is, do you tape the calls? I know something about this file. If a taxpayer believes they have been misinformed by the agency, and that might be up to 30% of taxpayers who are in that case, and if that is problematic for them, it causes them any damage, any harm, they have no recourse to prove that it is your agency that has misinformed them, given that you don't tape the calls. So, do you undertake today to compensate all Canadians who might have been financially harmed due to receiving misinformation from one of your agents? Well, what I can tell you is that there is a process now underway at the agency which allows people to challenge decisions made by the agency, and I'll allow the Commissioner to tell you more about that program. Yes, I know what that program is. I recognize what you're speaking of, but I'm asking, are you in a position to compensate any taxpayer and elector who might have been gotten stuck in this position? Let's say they take your agent's advice for cash, so to speak, and then they learn that no, they hear, no, you owe us $2,000, $3,000. You're way off. So what do? Do you take responsibility? Well, when it comes to the quality of the answers provided by agents, that's an interesting part of the Auditor General's report, and we are now focusing on personnel training to ensure that personnel will be providing accurate answers to questions put to them. That's step one. And if anyone should complain about the agency, it is possible, of course, to file a opposition. We have a program for that where people can provide their point of view on any circumstances, and that's always available to taxpayers. And now we will be in a position in the future to tape calls with our new technology. At present, we don't have that ability. We're not able to do so. But we are now taking steps to ensure that training is better. And once we have the new technology in place, I think this will make for even more improvement once we're able to tape the calls.
To Mr. Severa, Mr. Commission mentioned earlier the what was said at one of the meetings that we had here, that we needed data. So my question is really to you, Commissioner, and I'll background this discussion this way. All of us that are on this committee, at every stop, if those that were at every stop, we heard from people with type 1 diabetes or the parents of people with type 1 diabetes everywhere we went. They said effective in May, from their point of view, there was changes to the approvals, that there was more rejections. I think some of us seen yesterday an application that said denied across it and a section circled. And from our point of view, it gets to the point, who do you believe? We're hearing from CRA that there's been no changes. But I'll tell you from the public out there, they're saying there is. I can give you an example of a mother of 2 children, both with type 1. One's been rejected and the other's accepted. So do you have any data that you can provide us along the lines of the questions that we sent, the minutes that we sent to you, I guess? Do you have any data on that shows turnaround times over the last couple of years, acceptance of applications over the last couple of years, rejections? And has there been a change or more rejections than seen in the past? And if so, why?
So what I'd like to do is give you 2 parts to that answer. The first part is globally with the disability tax credit overall, and the second part would relate to diabetes, life-sustaining therapies. And I'm happy to provide this in writing to you. I won't go on at length on either of them. But on the first, globally, I gave you a couple of statistics, but we can track the disability credit claims acceptance rates over the last number of years, and they have generally been growing. And I gave you figures of 765,000 taxpayers utilized the DTC last year. That was an 8% increase over the year before. That amounted to about $1.3 billion in credit. So I can give you those numbers, but those aren't specific to the point you just raised, but I just want to tell you that we do track those numbers overall, and we have good statistics on that. Now, the disability tax credit is provided to people not so much based on the affliction they have, but on how it affects their everyday life. And that's the way the legislation reads, and that's the way we administer it. So we don't collect data systematically on diabetes versus another type of symptom that disability that someone might have. What we are doing, so I can't give you statistics based on that narrow disaggregated number, and certainly not for the recent months. What we are doing, and the Minister has asked us to look at how we collect data and how we can do better. And what we are doing is manually at the moment pulling some files, but this is a complicated process, so we run a lot of things automatically, but we are looking to go in and manually pull files. We're in the middle of that, or not even in the middle, we're at the beginning stages of that, and we hope to complete that somewhere around the end of the year, and we'll have a better estimate of what's been happening on that narrow range. Now, a question going forward for us is, should we be doing that across a broader range of disabilities? And we'll have to weigh that, but we have been asked, not only by you, but by the Minister, to see if we can do a better job collecting this data. So I can't give you statistics on diabetes particular, and not since May. I can tell you overall, as we look at the credit, it has been increasing in use and in dollar amounts. It is projected to increase in the future, but those are projections. And we will be able to come back to you. And certainly for the committee, as it struck the Disability Committee, we will look to bring that data forward to that committee so that we can talk about it and have a better understanding of what's going on. As the Minister said, we are always looking for ways to improve how we administer. We talk to medical practitioners. We try to communicate as effectively as we can with people about what the rules are. So we'll look forward to the data informing the committee's discussions and then moving forward from there.
What you can give us in writing would be important, but I think I can speak for every member of this committee here. We all have constituents who have been rejected, who have type 1 diabetes, and the disability tax credit is extremely important to them. I'll probably ask Ms. Goldsmith-Jones to outline what she knows about the issue if we have time before the end of the meeting. But this is a serious issue, and for those families out there who are getting rejected, us trying to explain to them just isn't adequate. We have people in tears on the phone who cannot understand why at one point in time they were accepted and now they're not. So something has to change somewhere. I don't know what it is, but I know what is happening. I'll say that, and I think everyone would agree with me in this committee. What is happening in terms of the rejections is quite unacceptable. Mr. Saber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ministre Leboutier, bienvenue ici dans le...
Welcome here among us at the Finance Committee, and thank you for all your work to help the middle class. And I have a few questions for you this afternoon.
A report, and which they outlined several things for taxpayers here in Canada. But we also know that in the 10 years that the Conservatives were in power, that a number of agencies had faced cuts and or reduced expenditures, or did not see their budgets increase, reducing their effectiveness of the agencies over a period of time. And what I wanted to know was what our government is doing to make sure that agencies like CRA are getting the resources they need to combat tax evasion or tax avoidance, and to ensure that tax filers have confidence in the system that's in place. Thank you, Minister.
In the first two budgets, we invested near $1 million. And I have said this before, this is a historical amount, a very high amount, and the government made a priority of countering tax evasion and tax avoidance, which allowed us to hire 100 auditors. Quite distinct from the Conservative government that had cut in investigations of tax evasion. 50 auditor positions were terminated under the Conservatives, so 990 audits were carried out, 442 inquiries into criminal matters have been undertaken as of 2017. That's what the investments in our agency have allowed for and will allow for over the coming 5 years. The first budget was carried in 2016, so that gave us appropriations through 2021. And now in 2017, we have appropriations through 2022, funds to work on tax evasion. Thank you very much, Madam Minister.
Gap here in Canada. And if yourself or one of the officials there can comment on what is being calculated or estimated or worked on with regards to calculating the tax gap that exists in Canada presently. And obviously our government's undertaken a number of steps to ensure that all Canadians and all Canadian organizations are paying their fair share of taxes. So if we can have some color on that.
Je peux vous dire que contrairement à l'ancien...
I can tell you that quite contrary to the actions of the prior government, the Conservative government, our government decided to work on the tax gap. We promised we would do so to Canadians, and that's exactly what we're now doing. Our approach is fact-based. We have shown how serious we are by publishing 3 studies since the month of June 2016, and we are continuing to work on the tax gap. By 2018, we will be in a position to table another report on the international aspect of the tax gap, and I would like the Commissioner, Mr. Hamilton, to give you a few more details.
On the tax gap, we have actually, as the Minister said, done 3 studies, including one on GST and one on the personal income tax. For example, in the personal income tax, we did that earlier this year in June, and we estimated that the gap was about $8.7 billion. We did a similar one for the GST. Our hope in the future is to do a similar one on the corporate side. So we are actually taking action, and indeed in June we invited experts from around the world here to have a seminar on the tax gap, because this is not easy for people to calculate, and all jurisdictions will tell you that. It's a complex calculation, a bunch of assumptions, but we feel like we can contribute by trying and recognizing that there may be methodological issues, but we'll be open about that and we'll construct something. The next step on our process here, as the Minister indicated, is to do an international tax gap estimate in the coming year, 2018. And that is even more complicated. I can tell you that right now there's no other country that does that. And so we'll see how that goes. But we are going to try that. Sweden tried it a few years ago. They don't do one currently because the methodology is even more difficult. But we are going to try to do it, do the best we can, make whatever assumptions we have, and do that. And then we'll complete the domestic side. So we are making progress here, but we're doing it in a way that recognizes this is not a simple calculation, and we have to be careful with how we treat the numbers and that we put all the proper caveats on them.
Mr. Poilievre.
Under the Income Tax Act, persons suffering with diabetes is entitled to receive the disability tax credit if their doctor verifies that they require 14 hours a week or more of life-sustaining therapy. Throughout the entire tenure of the previous Conservative government, and up until a year and a half into the mandate of this particular minister, all diabetics whose doctor certified that they met that requirement received the tax credit. It saved them about $1,500 a year in taxes. But then strangely, in May, language like this started to appear. And I want to know if this language is approved of by this minister and whether she stands beside it. Quote, An adult who independently manages insulin therapy on a regular basis does not generally meet the 14-hour per week requirement unless there are exceptional circumstances. This language has been used to deny the disability tax credit to literally thousands of suffering Canadians. These are just some of them. These are people who were rejected, who had been accepted for years. Does the minister agree with the language in these rejection letters? Does she believe that those who administer their own insulin are unlikely to qualify for the tax credit? Yes or no?
Madam Minister.
Well, what I wish to say to all of you here sitting around this table is that the disability tax credit law has not changed. There have been no amendments made to the criteria for receiving that credit. But what I can tell you as well is that we're working at the agency on communications, our communications with taxpayers, to ensure that our communications are more respectful, that they are easier to understand, and that all this respect the law.
And for the minister to answer, Mr. Balliet, what's the point of order?
Point of order is that I asked if the minister agrees with the wording that her department is putting in rejection letters to people suffering with diabetes. So far, she hasn't even come close to addressing that question.
I don't think that's a point of order. The floor is yours, Madam Minister.
Well, my point is that we are now working at the agency on our communications with all Canadians to ensure that our communications are respectful, more respectful, and communications that explain clearly to Canadians what the legislation is, whether their requests are rejected or accepted, that our communications be much more human, much more friendly, and that's part of humanizing the agency. So you say more human, more human in overall. I would like to know whether your own wording, Minister, is something that you qualify as friendly, human.
With your own hand, adults who independently manage their insulin therapy on a regular basis are unlikely to meet the 14-hour per week requirement. You made a judgment in those words to overrule hundreds of doctors who have validated that these suffering people qualify for the tax credit. How can you sit here and tell us about your humanity when you wrote a letter like that and rejected all those people, when you personally interfered and overpowered the decisions of doctors right across this country?
Well, I would like to specify that the disability tax credit has been grown by 20% between 2015 and 2017. We've made it much more accessible. We have made it simpler to apply. The forms are simpler to fill out. We have rehired nurses, and we also allow taxpayers to turn to nurse practitioners who are able to respond to their questions and fill in the forms. That's what we're doing at the agency to ensure that people do receive the credits they have a right to. And I will allow Mr. Hamilton to give you more details on the technicalities.
I'm going to take my questions on this. I've read this language twice now. Once in the rejection letters that thousands of diabetics have received, once in a letter written by that minister who personally interfered to override the recommendation of doctors across this country. My question for you: is it still the policy of CRA that someone who self-administers insulin treatment to treat their diabetes does not qualify for the disability tax credit? Is that CRA's policy? Yes or no?
Our policy is to administer the provision as the Act provides. And so that may not be yes or no, but I'm telling you that the Act says, as you indicated, that it must require 14 hours per week. And the factual question is, does that person, in their particular circumstances, take that amount of time?
And who decides that? Who decides that?
Well, I'll outline the process for the disability tax credit. First of all, the person submits a form, 2201.
Yes, but who decides that? I'm not asking the process.
No, but it's part of the process tells you part of how the decision is made.
That's not that. Excuse me. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I do have a point of order.
You have to give the Commissioner time to answer your question. What's your point of order?
I'm simply asking for who decides whether someone meets the criteria. I'm not asking for the lengthy process. Who is the decision maker?
Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, it's not a lengthy process, but I think it's important to understand the process, which is you submit the form, the medical practitioner fills a section of the form that says this person has diabetes, has life-sustaining therapy, and takes an attempt at saying whether he or she thinks that it meets the requirements of the Act. But we do not give the doctor the responsibility to determine whether it qualifies for the Act. So we might go back, for example, to the doctor with further questions and say, well, tell me a bit more about this and that person's particular circumstances. They may have a combination of afflictions. But at the end of the day, we have to decide if it conforms with the Act, but we do so taking on board what the doctor has said. But oftentimes we have to ask more questions, and that can be some of the correspondence that you may be referring to. What does that follow-up with the doctor say so that we can get the best information?
Will you be using...
Well over time in this round. I'm going to go to Mr. Fergus. We'll be coming back to Mr. Albas or yourself, and you can further those questions then. Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Mr. Hamilton, and it's in the same line of questioning that Mr. Poilievre was using.
765,000 applicants last year. This is an 8% increase over the year previous, represents about $1.3 billion worth of disability tax credit value, of the total value of the DTC. For at least a month now, there's been a public controversy over what Canadians who usually avail themselves of this tax credit have been concerned about since they've heard about from the month of May. You've assured us before this committee that the legislation hasn't changed. You've assured us that no regulations have changed, but something has changed. Now, given your role in the Deputy Minister type role as Commissioner, can you give us an educated guess as to what has changed in terms of the procedures?
What I can tell you based on what I know right now, and I think I indicated earlier, we are going back and looking at some of the specific files to try to get the data to make an assessment of what's there. Not everybody who applies is eligible, so there is a process of deciding on eligibility. We would need to look at the particular cases both this year and in previous years to form a judgment about whether the right things are happening, whether the provision is being administered in accordance with the Act. The one thing that I should say that I wanted to add on to the previous answer, which is relevant, if someone feels that we've made an incorrect decision, we haven't accounted all the information or we haven't considered it properly. In addition to the normal appeals process that I mentioned earlier, you can always appeal to us, and we have a separate entity that takes appeals. You can just send us back new information and come back to us. So we make sure that people are aware of that, and I would say it here today, if somebody feels like we have incorrectly judged the material that's in front of us, or we didn't take into account or didn't have some information, they can always come back to us. And then if that fails, then they can appeal. But at the moment, I would say there are a variety of reasons why someone might not be eligible, and I just really can't comment on specific cases.
And I appreciate that, and I understand that. I guess the question is that something has changed from this year, from last year. And for some reason, if this were a minor increase, or if it happened to a few people, I don't think we would have heard about it. But the fact is, it seems to have happened to a lot of people. And it seems to some people who have been regular beneficiaries of this tax credit in previous years have found themselves not being eligible for it starting in May of 2017. We know the separation between the minister and the commissioner. We know that the agency has an arm's length perspective. And I'm not asking you to talk about specific cases, but surely it stands to reason that there has been some systemic change which has happened. I don't know if it was perhaps just a new way of looking at things, but it seems that there has been a significant and noticeable increase in rejection letters. I don't know what percentage that is. I don't know what number that represents. We'll happily receive that information from you as you go through the files one by one. But something, somewhere, someone has changed the way that they look at these files. Do we not have an inkling of where that is happening?
Without having all of the information
Without
come
all
out,
of the knowledge, I'm looking for a best guess.
I will offer up two things that might be contributing. One is more gradual, and that is technology changes that are happening that might mean that one can deal with whatever the disability is, one can deal with it with less impact on your day-to-day life. And diabetes could be an example of that. So that's a general trend that is happening, that there are new technologies coming available that make it easier. And since the disability tax credit operates based on how much it is affecting your day-to-day life, that's one possibility. I've put that in. The second is we are always, as the minister said, trying to work with the medical community and the disability community to make sure we're making the forms simpler, make sure that we're getting the information that we need in a way that they can provide them. So we have communication with doctors, for example, where we're asking them, can you tell us why this person is eligible for the credit? And they've asked us to make that letter a little simpler for them because sometimes they have a difficult time forming a basis for that judgment. So we change those. Could something like that have changed it? That'll be something that we'll have to look at, but I really want to take a look at the actual numbers to see. And at the end of the day, the question for us is it being administered fairly, and is it being administered in accordance with the Act? And that will be how it's not, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Commissioner, I know the minister said she had to leave at 4:30. Are you okay for two more questioners? Okay, Mr. Albas and then Ms. O'Connell, and we'll keep it tight, 5 minutes each.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, when asked about Brofman's links to the Cayman Islands tax evasion scheme, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "We have received assurances that all rules were followed, and we are satisfied with those assurances." Minister, do you agree with that? Do you agree with the Prime Minister?
Listen, what I can tell you is this. It's just ridiculous to suggest that the Prime Minister would interfere in the cases put before the CRA.
Yes or no?
It's ridiculous to say that the Prime Minister would interfere in the operations and cases of the CRA.
Speaks for the government. The Prime Minister is the one that appointed you to your position, Minister. Is that what the Prime Minister has said to the public? Is that a statement you agree with? Yes or no?
It is ridiculous to say that the Prime Minister would interfere in CRA cases. We'll leave it up to the CRA to do its work, and all information that concerns the Paradise Papers are taken very seriously by the agency. If there are accusations or charges that would be laid,
She elaborated, and again, if she wants to say the same thing over and over, I'll change my tact. Mr. Hamilton, thanks for the work you do on behalf of Canadians. Actually, in 2013, the Auditor General actually said that CRA did a very good job during the Liechtenstein list, and that you tackled it appropriately. So I do hope that you are given the same kind of support, and that in your current endeavors, and I hope that there's quite a wide web cast by papers such as the Paradise Papers, and I hope you do that, follow through with that. In regards to the committee that you said you set up regarding the disability tax credit, Commissioner, does that committee have operational oversight?
No, that committee won't have operational oversight. We're still working on the terms of reference precisely, but it will be to advise us on administrative issues. How can we either better communicate, or what are some emerging issues that are out there that we need to start thinking about?
So consultation only then. They will be giving input to how the CRA conducts itself, but won't have any operational or a tribunal-like function to be able to appeal. Is that correct?
No, they provide advice.
Okay, so for the people that are currently being ruled ineligible for the disability tax credit, they would not be able to appeal to this committee for any help?
No, they could communicate with the committee, but the committee wouldn't have any role in deciding on theirs, but the committee could come to us and say,
so my concern as Commissioner is that the disability tax credit allows you to become eligible for the registered disability savings plan. And in next year, 2018, is the first year that people can start to withdraw from that. If someone is ruled ineligible then for the DTC, then they are no longer eligible for the registered disabled savings plan. Is that correct, yes or no?
Yes, you have to. One of the conditions of being eligible for the registered disability savings plan is that you have to be eligible for the DTC.
So if you get ruled ineligible for the DTC, you become ineligible for the registered disability savings plan, and then the monies, the grants that the government has put into that RDSP then is clawed back into general revenue. Is that correct?
In terms of the specific operations of the RDSP, despite the fact that I was at the Department of Finance when we set that up, I can't remember the precise rules, but I know that my colleague Frank Vermatten, who will be here in the second hour, may be able to explain that. But in a sense, you become ineligible, and then there's a process by which you wind down over time. Although I would say that if you are judged ineligible, but you make the case and become eligible again, then there's a process for making sure that does not get
and my last question, just in...
We're done because, Madam Minister, did you, the Minister didn't finish her response to your earlier question before you cut her off. Do you have anything more to add in your response to the Prime Minister statement question? If you do, the floor is yours. You were cut off.
What I want to add with respect to the DTC in dismantling the very important forum that was represented by the advisory committee, you deprived people of their rights, and you created this situation of doubt about the decisions of the agency. By reinstating the committee, it is going to be a very important tool that the agency will be able to use.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here today. Actually, my question was exactly leading up to where the minister left off. And to Mr. Albus's point, had the Conservatives not cut the advisory committee and we began to get wind of concerns or interpretation changes, that it could have been exactly that advisory committee that could have looked at this, could have looked at the technologies, and could have advised the CRA before it became an issue and gotten to this level, to the point where now the CRA is manually going through, 7,500 personal cases. So the advisory committee could have actually been looking at, for the last number of years since the Conservatives cut it, on new technologies and how it actually implements and affects that 14-hour criteria, or maybe made recommendations to change legislation keeping in mind the disability or the new changes in technology. So my question is, how much did the Conservatives save by getting rid of the advisory committee that could have helped prevent this in the first place?
What I can tell you is this. Since the government has been in place, and it is in my mandate letter, we have the concerns of the people at the very heart of our operations. We've increased the numbers of those persons who are entitled to the DTC. But I also want to point out that that our interactions with stakeholders will allow us to examine the administrative practices in the agency, look at the quality of it and the level of services that are being offered to persons with disabilities. Our audit processes are there. Working with Diabetes Canada, we are working with the figures that have been given to us at the present time. We want to look at that, but now we're having to do it manually. So for those people who meet the criteria, they're entitled to the benefit. Full stop.
Can you provide this committee in terms of these numbers as you find it out? I'd also like included how much money the Conservatives saved by getting rid of this committee in 2006. And also, I'd like to know how much was cut by previous governments in the training of the administration of disability tax credits. I'd like to know over the last 10 years how much money was reduced in the training of CRA employees, specifically in the administration of disability tax credits. The other thing I'd like to get to, because my time is very limited.
The last other thing.
No problem. You mentioned, Mr. Hamilton, I believe, or maybe Madam Minister, you both did, that the technology in regards to the phone system and the Auditor General's report was 20-year-old technology. And the action plan has already been in place. The phones have already been ordered, or the new technology. So I'm assuming that wasn't in reaction to the Auditor General's report of this week, because you couldn't have possibly ordered a brand new technology in a couple of days. But if it's 20-year-old technology, I'm curious, when did the CRA first ask for updated technology, and was it ever approved in previous budgets?
I'll take that one, but only to say I'm not sure of the answer to your last part, and maybe just to correct a little bit of the perception on the first part. I will endeavour to find out when we first asked for it. I know that it predated my arrival, which was a year ago, and I wouldn't quite characterize it as the phones have been ordered. We are in negotiation on how we can put this new system into place. So it's been agreed what it would look like. It's actually a technology that's been proven in other areas, and we hope to put it into place next year at the beginning part of 2018. So it's not there, but the point you made is absolutely right. That the AG flagged this concern, but we already knew we had antiquated technology. It needed to be replaced.
When did CRA know?
And that, I don't know. All I can say is it predated me, and that was a year ago. So I would imagine 2 or 3 years ago at least. But I can't say that for sure. We will find out. Frank may know in the second hour, but it wasn't new.
Thank you.
Could Commissioner get back to us with that information? And before I let you go, on the basically the internal look you're having at disabilities, which includes diabetes, I would certainly hope that it includes professionals in the field who deal with type 1 diabetes patients, because you know, some of the ones we talk to will tell us, yes, my son or daughter has an insulin pump, and there is the new technology. But still the effort they have to go through in terms of the diet and everything else really does get them up to the 14 hours. And I can't tell you, based on what we've heard, there needs to be some decisions made on this particular application process pretty urgently. So with that, we will suspend, and I guess we really don't have to suspend. The other witnesses are at the table. We'll thank you, Madam Minister and Commissioner Hamilton, for your answering our questions and your presentations, and we will go to another round of questions with the officials from CRA. Thank you again. So, who's on our next list? Mr. Fergus, you're in the second round. And we'll keep Mr. Vermeten, Ms. Cannon, and Mr. Gallivan here. I don't think you have any more opening statements. We're fine? Okay, Mr. Fergus, you're on.
Thank you very much. I'm not certain who would apply to this, but I would like to speak a little further, if I could, regarding following the same line of questionings which I had to the Commissioner. I'll let them get into place first, Mr. Chair, if that's all right. If that won't count against my time.
Seconds in, it's costing you dearly, but we'll start over.
You're very kind.
Thank you, folks, for the musical chairs. Go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Mr. Vermeeten, can you give me your correct pronunciation of your name? I wouldn't want to get that wrong.
Vermeeten is good, but I prefer Vermonten.
Well, I'll stick to Mr. Vermeeten. Thank you. The Commissioner raised the possibility, and to be confirmed after you take a look at it, that perhaps there are more modern procedures in which someone who would be diabetic could administer the insulin shots, which would bring their number of hours below 14. I have to admit, I am not familiar beyond what I've heard from my constituents as to what is involved. But again, can you give me a sense as to whether or not perhaps that information about a new approach has been shared with the employees of CRA, the ones who are doing the evaluation of the requests for approval or denial of the DTC?
Well, I'd say it's common knowledge that technology improves over time, medical technology improves, and certainly there's awareness of the people that are administering the disability tax credit, including the nurse practitioners that are there. So certainly they're aware. So you have things like wireless insulin pumps that make the management of diabetes quite a bit easier. Glucose meters again. So there's a range of improvements, and you're going to have people that are impacted by diabetes a range of different ways. And I think we all know people in some cases where it's managed quite well and doesn't impact day-to-day life as much. Certainly it always does. And in other cases, people are very severely impacted. And the question is, does that therapy, the eligible part of the therapy, does that take 14 hours?
So we're going now down a path, and I understand this path with caveat that you are going to be taking a look at this more closely, but this is sort of new now, that there perhaps is a different way of evaluating whether or not people, what procedures that they do to provide themselves with the insulin injections to save their lives. Is this common standard practice amongst Canadians? If it is standard practice, how has that been shared with CRA, and then how does CRA then interpret that or make that a part of its policies in the evaluation of whether or not someone qualifies for the DTC? In other words, what I'm really trying to say is that if this has been a change, if this evaluation or this assessment by CRA that they're based on the professional advice that they've received, is this professional advice widely shared with Canadians? And is this current and common practice among Canadians? Because it would appear to me that there's a lot of people who aren't aware of these changes, or they are using the old method, and the doctors are certifying that they are still taking 14 hours or more a week to provide this necessary medical treatment.
A lot of different questions in there. I think we send, or the applicant brings the application to the medical practitioner, and the medical practitioner provides this information. And
does the medical practitioner provide the information confidentially to CRA, or does it go back to the person who's applying and then they provide it to the department?
Usually it's the individual gives the application to the doctor. The doctor fills it out right on the spot, and it's usually the individual that then mails it back to us.
So the individual would have seen what the doctor put on. There wouldn't have been any surprises. And if the doctor says that it takes, if their doctor says it takes 14 hours, it takes 14 hours.
Well, we look at each one on a case-by-case basis, and if a doctor simply says it takes 14 hours, that's not going to be sufficient information.
Was it sufficient before?
It's never been sufficient. What we'd want is, in most cases, we would want a listing of, well, what takes 14 hours. So I'm not going to say we do that in each and every case, because sometimes there's complicating factors. There's other interactions with other with other medical complications that makes it so obvious that we don't need to ask those follow-up questions. So, but in many cases, we do need to follow up.
My last question would be then: it would appear that you've briefed, or the public lines of the commissioner and the minister has been briefed by saying that nothing has changed in terms of the legislation or the regulations or the criteria. But there seems to be a difference, or there seems to be a suggestion that there's a different evaluation which is going on based on some new information.
The evaluation, you're absolutely right. The legislation hasn't changed. The folio, which is like the regulation, the folio hasn't changed, which is the interpretation of the legislation. It hasn't changed for years with respect to life-sustaining therapy. So you're absolutely right. And the criteria that's used, absolutely, it's always been 14 hours. So that part has remained identical. Over time, though, we do continue to make improvements and modifications to how we administer the program, how we communicate to the medical community, how that's done, the information that's sent, the information that's sent back. That's evolved. For example, the form's been greatly simplified. It was greatly simplified in November 2015. Am I getting cut?
No, you continue, but no. I need to say something to the chair.
So there are a range of changes that are made in terms of the administration, but in terms of their criteria about the 14-hour threshold and what activities are considered eligible and which aren't. For example, physical activity is not considered eligible. Calorie counting is not considered eligible. None of that has changed.
Mr. Chair, before we go on, I would appreciate if you would seek from the department a better understanding as to perhaps the word doesn't seem to be criteria, but it seems to be something a little less than that might have changed. And I'd appreciate just, when you request for more information from the department, that we can explore just a little bit lower than what the normal criteria are, because I don't know what word you use, but it seems something's changed.
Okay, we'll take that under consideration. Mr. Commish.
I will second the supplication to the chair for that information from CRA. Something obviously has changed because the minister sends out letters of refusal to T1D diabetics, and they are different because they have a different wording in them. It says, in general and with consideration given to recent advances in technology, adults who independently manage their insulin therapy on a regular basis are unlikely to meet the 14 hours per week requirement. Is that going to be removed then? If nothing has changed, then why was this added to the letter? And is that going to be removed now from the letters that bear the signature of the Minister of National Revenue?
Mike's frank, don't worry about them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's easy. So the communications with the medical community does change from time to time, absolutely. As we continue in all programs to try to make improvements, to try to administer the program as closely as possible to, in our case, the Income Tax Act. So,
but what about diabetic sufferers? This isn't to a doctor. This is to a person. It has that wording in here.
It's. Could I see it? Sure. It's a letter to an individual.
Well, I'll just give it to you. Right here. Sure.
Real name on it.
Yeah. My colleague will just hand you the letter.
Yep.
We can find a copier and make one right away, sure. Yeah.
Copies for all committees so we can see
I wasn't the
what-
one requesting, it's the witness who requested it.
No, but you're referring to a document that I'm just asking if there is a copy.
She is effecting a point of order. Do we have copies that can go to other members?
Well, I'm trying to assist the witness who asked me for the letter I'm referring to.
That's not a problem. We'll not take the time from you. We'll give the
Thank you,
Frank time to read the letter. Okay.
What's the question?
Will then now, if you said nothing has changed, will you then remove from the minister's letters, in general with consideration given to recent advances in technology, adults who independently manage their insulin therapy on a regular basis are unlikely to meet the 14 hours per week requirement? That is a new phrase that was not there before. Will that then now be removed?
Well, this is a letter, and it refers to the assessment of the fact that in cases of well-managed diabetes, it doesn't take 14 hours of therapy, the eligible activities, to do the therapy. So.
Well, no, it actually doesn't say that. It says, with consideration for recent advances in technology. It doesn't talk so much about the management. It talks about technology changes and that being given the reason to refuse people. And just on technology, I actually have the form here for disability tax credits. And according to what I see here, it's not been simplified. It says life-sustaining therapy on page 4. It was either the minister or the commissioner who said that there has not been a freeze, so directly contradicting what Diabetes Canada said to this committee, that there has not been a freeze to those applications. Has there been a freeze to anybody who says yes to any of the 3 boxes here for life-sustaining therapy? Yes or no?
Has there, sorry, I don't have the form in front of me, but you're, I guess you're asking me about this letter, and you're asking me, do I believe that...
That was my previous question. Okay. I've moved on from that to ask you specifically about the DTC application. On page 4, it refers to life-sustaining therapy. There are 3 boxes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and it goes into mandatory details about the therapy being sought by the individual applying here. This is filled out by the medical doctor or nurse practitioner, and then the minister or the commissioner said that there was no freeze on applications, which directly contradicts what Diabetes Canada said to this committee. So I'm asking you, if there was no freeze to the DTC, then was there a freeze to anybody who said yes to any one of these 3 categories under life-sustaining therapy?
There was, when this controversy started, I think about a month ago or something.
More, since May.
Yeah, I think in terms of when
you changed the rules,
when it became a more public, when it became a public issue, there was a short period of time where we closely looked at some of the existing files to see whether there was something we were not processing properly, or that, and so we did for a short period of time stop processing, but that processing has started again. So
you said you stopped processing?
Well, of those specific files, there were a lot of questions, and we did our due diligence to make sure that we are processing them properly, processing according to the Income Tax Act, the 14-hour threshold. Because, of course, when somebody asks us questions, and when my boss asks us questions, we look into it and make sure it's done properly. It is done properly, and we started reprocessing again. And so. So
did somebody ask you to review and freeze it temporarily because there was an issue that was cited?
My boss, the commissioner, asked me whether there was an issue, whether there was any problems in terms of how we are processing them. I do my due diligence, and I immediately check to find out, are we doing this properly? We do calls out to the fields. It takes a little while. There's a temporary hold.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a sec here, because one of the things that was put on notice by the chair, and it was, I'm just going to read back our expectations for data that will show what the applications are as best CRA can, and what the exceptions and rejections are as compared to 2 or 3 years back. So I have one question, because we've only looked at the front end of the DTC, which is the application process. But for those few who have been approved for the for the DTC, how long does it take them right now to get their refund? Because I've heard they can take up to 10, 20, 30 weeks depending on the individual case. There's the front end of people taking a long time, some being refused, and then there's a back end once you are approved that the refund check takes much longer now to be received. So what is the timeline now?
There are two steps. The first step is the initial application and whether you're approved, and that usually takes between 6 and 10 weeks. And we're within that range now, and it will fluctuate over the course of the year. Then there's
actually,
the second part.
You're contradicting the commissioner. The commissioner said 10 weeks.
Yeah, I said between 6 to 10 weeks. Yeah,
6 to 10.
6 to 10. 6 to 10 weeks, and it'll fluctuate throughout the year. And there will be exceptions when, for example, we have follow-up with doctors. The doctor there isn't the follow-up, or with the patient, so that can take longer at times. But it is 6 to 10 weeks, our service standard. Internally, we target 8 weeks, and sometimes we do a little better, sometimes we do a little worse, but it's between 6 and 10 weeks, so we're comfortable when it's between 6 and 10 weeks. And
finish your response.
And the refund checks?
Yeah, no, and then you're way at a time, Tom, but we'll go ahead, Mr. Vermat.
And then the second component is what's called the adjustment, the T1 adjustment, that we now do automatically if the individual asks. And that's one of the improvements, again, we made to the application form. You can now put in a check. We will automatically provide those refunds for as far back as 10 years. So how long that takes depends upon the complexity of those changes. If it's a simple adjustment, our standard for paper adjustments is 8 weeks. We're a little bit over that right now. We're about 10 weeks. As you get into the more complex ones, it can take longer, absolutely. And you're always going to find exceptions where it takes quite a while for a variety of reasons.
Okay, thank you both for a fairly intense line of questioning. Mr. Dussault.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à vous pour votre présence.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses here today. My first question is for Mr. Gallivan. The Minister told us several times when we were speaking of the EMG case, the KPMG case, that justice might be involved. She said that in a number of ways. So how many criminal cases have been entered before the courts against KPMG? Or, as you're aware, a criminal investigation can take quite a lot of time. It can take years to carry out and to work through such a file. As confirmed by both the Minister and myself, we will pursue this to the end. And our work is far from being over right now, so you're welcome to say zero if you want. And in the same line of business, we know that one of the first files that the Minister of Revenue dealt with in matters of international tax evasion is the Panama Papers. So how many files have been picked up and brought before the criminal courts in relation to the Panama Papers? Look, I agree that when it comes to overseas tax evasion, criminal persecution is necessary. For the Panama Papers, there are 123 civil audits underway now, 123. Many of the criminal investigations are now coming to maturity, under 10 at present. We don't want to tell you exactly how many because we don't want to interfere with ongoing investigations. So we have had some public visibility, but there will be more public visibility when it comes to searches and so on, but that's in the months to come. There is no other country, however, that has reached any final criminal decision on this. Like other countries around the world, we got our investigations about the Panama Paper issues underway before it hit the media. But before you get to, through a criminal trial, it takes quite some time. The first time the public is likely to hear about this will be during search procedures, and that is forthcoming in the months to come. Thank you. That's a good update. As for the 25 million, as you know, the Minister of National Revenue was interviewed on TV in Quebec, and she seems to repeat the same figures over and over again. She seems to have a set line of responses, and she keeps spouting them, 25 billion, 25 billion, 25 billion. So people are wondering what this 25 billion represents and how much of that is due to overseas issues. About two-thirds of it, 16. And the national revenue is dealing with its transfer issues and trust companies. Two-thirds, however, of that 25 billion involves multinationals that use trusts and that type of scheme. Would it be possible to share that information with the Minister of National Revenue so that she'll be in a better position to answer our questions more clearly? I think that the information is available to the public. It's out in the public through our reports. It's up on our website. We're fully aware that Canadians are very concerned about agency undertakings. That's why we have started speaking up about our criminal investigations at the search point. We're trying to do that more. We are also trying to mentioning more our criminal charges against professionals, 44 million last year, so it's more than the 25 billion. Multinationals and people with $30 million as in assets and more these are factors that play into this type of behavior. We've had 44 million in penalties so far last year. So, if with your permission, Mr. Chair.
General of Canada of November 21st, 2017. The committee invite the Minister of National Revenue, the Honorable Diane Leboutier, to appear before the committee regarding the Auditor General's report to Call Centers Canada Revenue Agency.
To deal with that motion now?
Yes, please.
It's your right, and you did give the 48-hour notice, so is everyone aware of the motion, or you've got copies to go around? They're being distributed. I'll read it again. Motion by Mr. Dussault that following the tabling of the report of the Auditor General of Canada of November 21, 2017, the committee invite the Minister of National Revenue, the Honourable Diane Leboutier, to appear before the committee regarding the Auditor General's report to Call Centers Canada Revenue Agency. So it is open for debate. Do you want to go ahead, Mr. Dussault?
Je vais être très rapide là, par respect pour les...
Brief, out of respect for our witnesses here before us, I think that everyone's aware of this issue. The fact that the Auditor General has tabled a highly critical report about the Canada Revenue Agency. I don't think that our meeting today gives us enough time to deal with this, to get into the details. I've tried.
Une étude plus approfondie parce que
minutes to do so. I think we should study this in depth, given that the information in the reports is highly troubling. Over half the calls are blocked. You can't even get through on the lines, and 30% of citizens who are able to reach an agent, it would seem that they're given the wrong information. So I think that our committee must address this issue. It falls within our mandate. And the minister should be called upon to give a full explanation, more than she was able to do in the few minutes she had to speak to us today. I haven't set the number of meetings and not even a date. I just wish to ensure that here in this committee we're able to delve into this appropriately at a date appropriate and convenient to the members of the committee, and we'll be able to decide what the ideal dates are. I won't go on any longer. I simply ask for your support, and we'll be able to get back to our witnesses as soon as we vote on this.
Well, Ms. O'Connell is number one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I appreciate Mr. Dussault's motion. I mean, the minister was just here, and she spoke to the Auditor General's report. Mr. Dussault had the opportunity and asked her and the Commissioner questions specifically to the Auditor General report. I get that many times when ministers appear before us, it never feels like we have enough time as individual members. but she did actually stay longer than was scheduled and made notice in advance to the committee that she was happy to talk about any of the issues, not just supplementary estimates. So I feel like the questions and the opportunities to have this conversation was done, and the minister remained here as long as everybody needed to have their turn and stick to the schedule. So, I mean, I don't think there's an issue in the sense of the minister being able to talk about this. She's spoken about it in the House. She spoke about it again here today, and she spoke about it in her opening comments, which was not waiting just to react to a question. So I think she provided a lot of information to this committee and made herself very well available to talk about any of the issues this committee wanted to, which sometimes is more than we get in terms of the structure of the committee and sticking to the motion at hand. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of the minister coming here and speaking about the Auditor General report, but she just did. And in fairness, to the best interest of this committee's time, I feel like we had that opportunity, and the member did get to ask those specific questions as well.
I have on my list Mr. Polyev and then Mr. Kamish. Mr.
I'm going to pass.
Mr. Kamish.
I'm sorry to disappoint you over there. I know you were anxiously awaiting my remarks.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Kamish.
I'd like to thank my colleague for ceding his turn, so I could just mention that. Not everybody got their turn, because I didn't get a chance to ask questions of the minister. The minister specifically came in here to speak about the supplementary estimates, and, you know, through her joyous willingness to answer extra questions, because she knew she was put on notice by the chair that there were going to be different questions asked than just about the subs. And that's why she was. I think Mr. Dussault's motion is perfectly reasonable. One of the fundamental things that we do is review how government operates and what it does. It's more than reasonable to have her come and return here to spend a full hour or more to speak specifically to the issue with the call centers and how the service levels are awful. It's the most interaction a person will have in Canada is trying to pay their taxes. And if most of the attempts to contact the CRA winds up without the connection being even made, and then a third of the answers are incorrect, I think that's worthy of this committee looking at it some more and having a more fulsome discussion. Whereas today we had the subs, we had the DTC, and we had perhaps 7 minutes on the call centers. So this committee has met, you know, every single day on some weeks, except for Fridays, and even on during travel it has. I don't mind doing more work. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to have the specific people involved in administrating the call centers explain to us why, what's going on, the technology, and the direction was given. There's a lot more detail to discover in an interaction at the committee than there is through question period, because we can go into the details and we can have a back and forth. So, Mr. Chair, I think this is a good motion proposed by my colleague from the New Democrats, and we should seriously consider. Mr.
Kelly.
Just a very brief comment, and I completely agree with Mr. Kamish. And the answers that we heard today were, in many cases, not satisfactory. And I would love to have the minister be given an additional opportunity to elaborate further than the answers we got today.
Okay, with that, are we ready for the question? A recorded vote. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Fergus. Mr. Sorbera. Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Graywall. Mr. Lauzon. Mr. Polyev.
Yes.
Mr. Albus.
Yes.
Mr. Kamish. Yes. Mr. Dussault.
Motion is lost. Where's our back to our original question list? Who we got? I believe Miss. Okay, we have Miss O'Connell, and we're going to tighten it up to about 4-minute rounds so that we can get most people on. Miss O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you all for being here. And Mr. Chair, I just want to make something clear. My frustration with some of the conversation around the disability tax credit should not be misunderstood to thinking that, as the chair, Mr. Fergus, and many of my colleagues have stated in terms of our concerns that something in fact has changed in terms of the administration or the communication, or there is something that is going on, and even the commissioner acknowledged that they have to get to the bottom of where these concerns are coming from. But my frustration comes from the fact that, one, I spent, prior to being a federal member, I spent a large part of my career fighting for persons with disabilities, and it really, really bothers me when I see the opposition fighting and using people with disabilities as a political pawn when they knew that making cuts to the CRA, cutting the Disability Advisory Committee, cutting training, you know, what did they think would happen, Mr. Chair? Did they think that service levels would increase by making substantial cuts to the CRA and cutting nurses who could help as well at the CRA administer some of these things? So my frustration is along the fact that substantial cuts happened over the past decade, and now we're living with the ramifications. Cuts were made so that technology couldn't be increased, and now we have to manually go through to figure out where the problems are coming from. In this day and age, in this government, the CRA has to manually pull files to figure out the data. Perhaps had the Conservatives made some investments and kept up with the times, we could have managed this in a way to make sure that the most vulnerable persons with disabilities who fundamentally need this money and these resources wouldn't have to be waiting for cases to be manually pulled so that we could get to the appropriate solution. So with that preamble, Mr. Chair, I'll get to my questions in terms of technologies. And I think this is what we tend to be hearing, where there might be some level of difference. And I'll say difference because we don't even have an answer of what's going on, but we know that there was no policy change. So there seems to be some difference, and it seems to be coming from this idea that technologies have made the administration of type 1 diabetes in particular easier to manage, or not requiring those 14 hours. But I guess my question comes down to, and my critical question is, who in the CRA, what level of the agency determines at what point that the technology correlates to a reduction in hours needed? You don't have the Disability Advisory Committee anymore since 2006 until today. You didn't have them to consult with. The Conservatives also fired nurses that would advise at the CRA. So at what level did the discussion around technologies, who made that decision? Like, who would make a decision like that if that's ultimately the rationale? And it's not just with diabetes, it could be for anything in administering the disability tax credit.
Yeah, these are complex questions and a complex decision-making process. I think we run a fairly large program here. As the Commissioner said, we give out $1.3 billion of benefits for 2016-17. So it is a very big program. And we're processing a lot of applications, 265,000 I think it was last year, so quite a few. So you can imagine how large the program is, and then there are various lines of impacts, and for each one there are tests to determine whether an individual would qualify, and one needs to keep up to date with the medical technologies, because ultimately what you're seeing is after treatment, for example, you take a look at something like vision. It's after eye surgery. What is the impairment? It's not before eye surgery. So yeah, you absolutely
but
need
is that a CR? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. It's just, is that a CRA manager that makes that up, keeping updated on the technology?
Yeah, it's CRA manager in consultation. So it would be at a manager level. So certainly wouldn't be made at my level. And managers and people that are trained in this. We have a staff of nurses at headquarters that are in constant communications with the medical community. They're doing research. We get doctors calling all the time, so the nurses very often will call doctors. And so there's a constant feedback loop here in terms of the evolution of technology, not just like you pointed out on diabetes, but on a whole range of issues. So we absolutely need to keep up to date on that, and that definitely impacts whether somebody will or will not be eligible, because it's done on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you both. Mr. Kelly.
And the preamble to that last question just simply can't go without some reply. Mr. Chair and to our witnesses, a decision was made, seemingly, one would guess at the ministerial level, to change how the disability tax credit is applied. We have a letter signed in the minister's own hand that states she believes that most type 1 diabetics do not meet the criteria. That's a policy decision. That has nothing to do with how many tax collectors the CRA employs. It doesn't have to do with cuts. It doesn't have to do with the number of employees that are there when a minister makes a decision. It doesn't have to do with committees. I would also note and remind, for the record, that transfers to the CRA steadily increased throughout the last Parliament, and I'm not sure what these cuts are to which Ms. O'Connell refers. The number of personnel employed by the CRA, I understand, peaked in about 2000 during the previous Liberal government, at about 2004 at 51,000 employees, and was cut during the final Parliament of the last Liberal government by 11,000 people. So I don't think, but none of this really matters. What matters is getting to a resolution over an issue that happened this past May, which is where, according to the reports that we've heard at this committee, that the approval rate for type 1 diabetics appears to have gone from an 80% approval to an 80% rejection. And the questions that have been asked around here are trying to get to the reason why, because it simply appears that there was a change in language in the letters and questionnaire that goes to medical personnel that asserts that most type 1 diabetics don't, in fact, qualify. So I'll cede the floor to you, Mr. Metten, and can you please, I mean, it would seem to be that simple, that this change in language in the form is what has resulted in this change from 80% approval to 80% rejection. And we await the data as specific as possible to demonstrate where the approvals went and where they are now.
So maybe I could say two things. First of all, we are looking at this and doing a comparison of the last several years and post May 2017, I think that you referred to. So we are looking over time to see what's happened to acceptance rates. So certainly we'll look at that, and that's going to take a little while because it is a manual process, because we actually don't store store data by the underlying disease. It's about the impairment that we look at. Second thing I'll say is, this is not a letter that indicates a policy change by the Minister of National Revenue. What's stated here is that there has been an evolution with respect to the therapy of diabetes, that things like devices like insulin pumps, and now it takes less time to manage diabetes.
I
absolutely stand behind this.
If I may.
Yes.
Type 1 diabetics have told both this committee and members of Parliament outside the committee that the technology, while is incredible in the way that it can help sustain life and improve the quality of life for diabetics, is not simpler. We've heard this from type 1 diabetics who insist that while yes, a pump is a wonderful advancement in technology, but the pump and the necessity of performing tests to correctly for the pump to be used correctly do not necessarily correlate at all to a reduction in the time applied to therapy.
Yeah. Can I say briefly?
That'll conclude this round of questioning, but finish where you started.
Yeah, I think you're going to get a range of views on that. My assessment, based on the information that I've received from our staff, is that there's been a lot of advances that actually do reduce the time it takes for some people to manage their diabetes. Not everybody, but it certainly does in some cases, and I'll add maybe many cases. That's one thing I'll say, but we can, argue back and forth that you've talked to some doctors. I'll say our staff has talked to many, many doctors, but that's, I think, part of the Disability Advisory Committee. I think is going to help provide advice on issues like that, and where you bring in professionals that are specialized in this area that will provide some advice on this. And I think that'll be very helpful because it clearly is a controversial issue, and I absolutely recognize and absolutely, we want to administer this in the very best way.
Okay, turning to Mr. Lusson, will be the last questioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will ask my question in French. Monsieur Vermeten.
Mr. Vermeten, much has been made of change, a change that has become apparent over the last months or weeks, and there's also much been made of technology, changes in technology. We know that often technology brings good news, creates new businesses, but sometimes also leads to lost jobs or lost services. And that seems to sort of be what's at issue here in this letter. So here's my question. Due to the fact that nurse practitioners were hired, more of them, to work on this file, and because the forms were simplified, and that the form was reworked, and that applications were reviewed, and all this was updated, such that letters were sent out to the effect that the 14 hours a week was no longer being respected as the criteria. Is that why that letter was sent out?
Nous échangeons des renseignements avec les médecins. Nous avons une correspondance pour veiller à avoir les renseignements voulus sur un cas individuel, afin d'être sûr de savoir si oui ou non il faut plus de 14 heures pour gérer le problème. Je dois dire que le formulaire est parfois difficile à remplir pour un médecin. En effet, prenez la dialyse. La dialyse, ça a lieu dans un cadre hospitalier, donc il est facile de savoir combien de temps ça prend. Nous ne sommes pas là pour parler de dialyse. Nous parlons des diabétiques qui s'auto-injectent de l'insuline. Et là, oui, ça devient plus difficile à quantifier pour un médecin. En effet, le médecin n'est pas témoin de l'injection. C'est différent de ce qui se passe pour une dialyse qui a lieu dans un hôpital. Pour ce qui est du diabète, la situation est plus complexe. C'est pourquoi les échanges, les correspondances avec les médecins sont importants. Ne perdons pas de vue non plus la complexité de la thérapie qui a été modernisée, qui dans certains
That's why those clarification letters are required and why we continually evolve with the communications to make sure that we are getting the specifics of that individual.
And also, il y a aussi les médecins dans vos formulaires. Est-ce que vous avez...
Yes, the forms for doctors. In your revised formula, did you see doctors who took into account the trips that they had to make, the cost of gasoline, or a case where if a diabetic is falling sick, has symptoms of the flu, and despite the fact that they take their insulin, they have a temporary drop in their state of health. They lose their sight. Say, for example, is this all taken into account in your formula?
Tax Act, and it sets out pretty clearly what is an eligible activity and what isn't eligible activity with respect to counting of those 14 hours. So you mentioned a whole range of things, and so for example, the travel back and forth to the doctor would not be eligible as part of this 14 hours.
Je sais que mon temps, c'est quoi, last one?
No, I know the criteria that you have set out, but I'm going away from that. What about going back and forth to the hospital? It's not, you don't take into account waiting in line to get your prescription. But what I'm talking about specifically is the consequences for someone who has a daily struggle keeping healthy with diabetes. What they have to do daily, is that considered, not the list that you have in your form 2201.
Only those things that are set out in the Income Tax Act. So we administer the program. So something like exercise, for example, like you said, to stay healthy, is not considered a part of that. Now, when there are complications and there are other health impacts, sometimes that does come into the application because a person can suffer from multiple afflictions. So it can come into account. But if you're talking about simply an application that is only life-sustaining therapy, the legislation sets out what is eligible and what isn't eligible, and it's fairly clear, and it hasn't changed for years.
We will have to leave it at that, and we do have to vote in supplementary estimates. I would say, Mr. Vermaten, I think you've seen here from members, there may be a big debate in how we got to here between different parties and different members, but I think you can see from every member, including myself, that there's a huge concern over the type 1 diabetes approval and disapproval. And I just want to outline to you that doesn't often, sometimes you're lobbied by an organization, but I can tell you on my own part, it isn't just Diabetes Canada that we hear from. It's individuals on the ground in all of her ridings. So I just say to you as one of the manager's assistant commissioners to keep that in mind in your deliberations, and we hope the advisory committee will help in that regard. So thank you for your appearance and answering questions. Thank you all three. To committee members, we need a vote on supplementary estimates B. You have them before you. Shall vote 1B under Canada Revenue Agency carry in the amount of $44,941,394. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Shall I report the supplementary estimates 2017-18B, 2017-18 under Canada Revenue Agency to the House? Agreed. On division. Agreed. Okay. Thank you. We will do that. Meeting adjourned.